Welcome to Unity Now, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Unity Now podcast. I'm your host, Toby Davis, in our continuing mission to highlight individuals and groups that are trying to find and solve issues of polarization and common ground in the nation. And I am pleased to be joined today by Kara Jarzynski, Executive Director of the Resolutionaries. Hi, Kara.
Hello. It's nice to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice for you to join us. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We almost had a podcast going right before we started here, so
I know.
We had to pause and get into it.
I know. It's real great talking to you. We launched right into that, didn't we?
Absolutely.
Now we get to bring everybody else along with us.
Yeah, so let's back up a second for him if we could. And if you could take a little bit of time for our audience to introduce yourself and what the
Sure.
Resolutionaries is.
My name is Kara Jarzynski, the Executive Director of Resolutionaries, as you said, and we're an organization dedicated to bringing Americans together. And our goal is to shift how we're doing things right now. No, we don't want to fight over our problems anymore. That's just not effective for government or for community or for families. We really want to find ways to work together to solve our problems and our issues and to celebrate the best parts of being American. And one of the things, our founder is a mediator. And so what he knows from his, 40 plus years doing mediation is that when we engage in conversations that are specifically aimed at identifying common values, that from that common value point, we can build bridges across what seems like a great divide. And we can actually make progress towards not only solving problems or policies that are going on, but also creating a space for everyone to thrive. And that's what we do. Right now, we're specifically focusing on a piece of legislation that would help do that. It's a federal act, but it would be activated at a hyper local level. So it's a really interesting bill in that regard.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I realized I talked about it and didn't say the name. It's called the Building Civic Bridges Act. That would be a pretty important part.
No, absolutely. And we'll continue to restate it and, of course, put it in all the episode descriptions for everyone. And real quick, back to your background, I noted that, your bio kind of said that you became interested in the civic bridge building after the 2016 election, which is a story I've heard on repeat and actually connects with myself as well, and also after the birth of your kids. How did that come about? Did you as well kind of see how Trump being elected and everything that affected, just totally polarized the country, and nothing was being solved, and it was just a symptom of the bigger problem sort of thing?
Well, can I take you back in time to the
Absolutely.
morning after he was elected?
Mm-hmm.
I was working at the time as a corporate facilitator and trainer, and I worked. A lot of times what would happen is we would launch an initiative that would be carried out with the top level executives, and they would get the mission from corporate, and then we would carry it down to managers. And then eventually we get down to all the people who were in the shop or at the retail space, and they would get the messaging. So everyone was getting it at some point. So I was at the time, we had done all the big stuff. And so now we were on the ground in the shops, and my territory to carry out this messaging was Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska. So I was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, the night of the election. And I showed up to the shop the next day, and there were two people who didn't show up to work. And, people don't show up to work. That's fine. And he said, I don't know if he's coming back. And I said, oh gosh, is everything okay? And he said, well, he may not quite be legal. And he's real nervous based upon what happened last night.
Wow.
And quite frankly, we don't know where he is. Nobody knows where he's at. And he said, which is a shame because he's one of our best workers. And I know his family, and his kids go to school with my kids, and I just don't know. And I just thought, there's a lot in that story to unpack. But what I carried away from it was that there was a population of people who immediately went into a fear state.
Right.
And there was another population of people who, in this sense, the business world, who were like, I just lost my best person. And, there's a lot going on in that. But in the business state, he all of a sudden had to deal with what to do on his floor with losing one of his best people. And then there was also the impact when I went into the training. There was this chaotic feeling with the other workers that was going on. No one was settled. No one was focused. No one was ready to work. And in that moment, I just thought, well, this doesn't have, what I know is that in order for the best work to happen, people need to feel like there's a foundation underneath their feet. They need to know that their business is good. They need to know that their managers are there to help them. They need to know that customers coming in want to see them. And if all of a sudden there's something rocky underneath, if there's something that is churning that people aren't addressing because they don't know how to address it, that rockiness does not lead to, it's not good for business. It is not good for our economy. It's not good for families. And so I just thought there has to be a better way. There's something that's going on right now. And I began to see it further and further. And I just thought there has to be a better way for us to function. And it began with a feeling. It began with, I don't know what this is. And you mentioned the birth of my kids. When my kids were born, all of a sudden, all my travel, all my work stopped because I had twins. So I wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah,
I was sitting in a living room with two babies and trying to figure out how to get all of those diapers changed and milk bottles and laundry done, and I had time to just think. And I was looking at these two little babies, and I knew my job was to feed them and to clothe them and to change their diaper and to make sure they had a roof over their head. But as I began to feel that sense of uneasiness that I described the morning after, that became really apparent really quickly, but it felt like it was everywhere. Everywhere I turned, that rumble underneath was there. And what it did was it just made me go, oh, my job as a mama is not just to make sure they have food, water, and shelter. My job as a mama is to make sure they have a future, and that future is as good as it can be.
Yeah.
And the best version of our future is not for one party or another party to take over. That's not America at all. The future is one where everyone's able to talk together to really find out what's best for the nation. And that's where wisdom comes from. And that's where the best pieces that make us America come from, I think.
Right. And so that turned you into a civically minded person, and within now the executive director of Resolutionaries. And Now we're talking about the Building Civic Bridges Act, and this has taken a while, right? I think this has even been introduced before, and
Mm-hmm.
I love the story I heard about how this idea became about
Yeah.
the trip to the YMCA,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how in a public setting people could not just go about their day without getting into fights over politics because of a shirt somebody wore or because of something that was on TV while somebody was working out, right?
But doesn't that blow your mind? At the
Yeah.
YMCA over the elliptical machine, people were getting into fistfights. And I don't mean just once or twice. I mean that those fights over politics were happening so bad that the YMCA actually called in a conflict resolution person. They were
Mm-hmm.
training their staff on what to do if someone broke out into fights. And I mean, this is in Tacoma, Washington. It's just blows my mind that that's the decision people were getting into while they're on an elliptical machine.
Yeah.
And so the why in that process asked their representative for help. What do you all have anything at the federal level that can help us? Because this is big. And then the other part of that story is around the same time, there were 3 acts of violence committed against 3 different communities of faith. An Islamic center was burned to the ground. 2 Buddhist faith leaders were assaulted, and and then a 3rd community was vandalized. And the response that those communities had was not to go out and retaliate or to. I'm sure there was a lot of feelings, but the action they took was actually to come together and to
Wow.
have an interfaith event to heal, to figure out what we could do to create bridges across the lines of difference, to create understanding about what each of these different religions holds. And they also asked their federal representative, they said, this is great. It's really powerful. It's really wonderful. But this isn't going to get the job done. Is there anything that the federal government can do to help? And that representative of both of those instances took place in the district of Representative Derek Kilmer from Washington. And so what I love about what Mr. Kilmer did was he went back to Washington and he looked into it. And what he found was that the U.S. does spend a lot of money every year doing funding initiatives that actually would help those instances that would happen with the faith communities or what happened at the Y. And we actually fund those initiatives to the tune of $315 million this year, last year, and the year before. 4 years ago, it was 310. And 5 years ago, it was 310 million. So you're looking at something that they've actually increased spending on in this time.
Yeah, I have on my notes, it's through the National Endowment for Democracy, right? Trying to foster social cohesion and support civic bridge building in other countries to strengthen democracy abroad,
That's
but
right.
not here.
That's right. The grand total of that we spend domestically on this budget is 0. So wow. $315 million abroad, absolutely nothing here at home. And as you know, polarization is a problem. And figuring out how to bridge across those lines of differences, that's something that maybe we could use help with. I remember reading about a librarian in not Des Moines, but in Iowa. I don't know where she was. And she said, look, I am trained in the Dewey Decimal System. I am not trained in how to stop 2 grown men from fighting right in front of me.
Yeah.
So, there's people who need help. And there are also communities that are proactively seeking out solutions. There are people who have already realized enough of living in problems and drama. Let's get to solutions. And to get to the solutions, we got to talk about the different policies. Stanford did an incredible experiment called America in One Room. I think they brought 500 different people from all across the political spectrum to a room in Dallas. Yeah, it was 500 registered voters from around the country, and they attended a weekend of civil discussions concerning all sorts of policy proposals. They looked at the economy, healthcare, the environment, immigration, foreign policy. None of those are easy topics for us to talk about, right?
Right, right.
But what they did was that group discussed 26 different proposals that were divided across party lines. And by the end of one weekend, just one weekend, Republicans and Democrats showed signs of lessening division on 22 of the 26 proposals.
Wow.
So that just shows you that it's not that we're suffering from a lack of consensus. That's not the point.
Right.
We're not, in America, we're not supposed to be all like one thing. That's the joy, is that we get to, the joy and the responsibility, that we get to have differences of opinion, and we get to freely debate and dialogue and talk about those differences of opinion. That is a beautiful right we enjoy, and it is also a responsibility.
Absolutely. It's the bedrock of our republic and our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about the details of the act, the Building Civic Bridges Act. It's going to authorize $25 million per year, right? In an office that already exists. Tell us about that.
So it's $25 million in the bill that was introduced in the House. And in the Senate, it's only $15 million. So drop of the bucket in terms of our federal budget. It is not a lot at all.
Right.
And I've heard people say, well, that's not going to get the job done. And it's true. It won't get the job done alone. But let me tell you about all of the beautiful organizations that are already doing work in this regard. And how, if they had additional support from the federal government at a hyperlocal level, and if the communities and neighborhoods also that didn't have anybody doing anything had access to some sort of support to help that librarian who doesn't want people fighting in front of her, or the school boards that are having people just break into fights, it's not effective governing.
Right.
So you have to simmer down that temperature. You have to give people a chance to talk without fear of repercussion and without the need to feel like they got to proselytize their position, but rather, what is your well thought out reasoning for believing what you do? And who are the people that are going to listen to you? And then vice versa, you listen and let the other side talk. And where in that conversation can you find that piece of commonality that makes you go, okay, this is where we can start? Our organization did, when we were first beginning, we would hold town halls over really difficult conversations, things that are hard to have conversations over. So we did abortion and gun control.
Wow. The easy ones.
COVID, the vaccine in the middle of that. Really hard stuff. And we were clear, the goal of this is not to actually create any sort of policy or to come to consensus. That's not the point. The point is to how do we actually get to a point where we can listen and have conversations over this? And the town hall that we held over gun control, I'll give you that example because it's beautiful, and it's probably the most salient example of how this sort of bridge building works.
Okay.
In that room, there was a woman who wanted zero controls. She wanted access to every gun that she wanted access to. She didn't think the government had any right to make any controls at all. On the other hand, there were people that wanted the most draconian measures and thought that all guns should be taken away. And then we had people peppered all along in the middle. What we did was we allowed everyone to share their position. And we were clear, this is just about listening. The moderator made sure everyone felt safe in sharing their opinion. And so everyone was heard. And that was good, right? We got through this statement where everyone got to be heard. And then we started working on backtracking. Why do you feel this way? What happened in your life, or what influences came in that made you believe that you should have absolutely no guns at all, or access to every gun or somewhere
Yeah.
in between. What happened that made you feel that way? And when we asked that question, what every single person in that room realized is that they had come to the conclusion that they had come to because they were trying to protect people they loved.
Common ground.
And that common ground of just saying, I got babies and I want to make sure my babies are safe. And to me, safety means no guns, or to me, safety means all the guns. That commonality just broke everyone open in a point where they could actually really begin to have a conversation of what it would look like policy-wise. That act of empathy and compassion allowed for the efficacy of policy to begin. Now, that's a little town hall in one city in America. That's not going to solve the whole policy issue over gun control, but it gives you a way that no longer were people walking into that room really defensive, going like, not wanting to be there.
Yeah.
What happened at the end was that one of the women, the one actually who was the most for having access to as many guns as she could, she said, I don't know if this is possible or okay, but could we have a group hug? I'd really like to have a group hug. And that to me is power. That to me is the power of our system in America. That we can have differences of opinion, and we can still come together and realize that there is a way that we are greater together than we ever are apart.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful story there in gathering. So do you think this bill could create more moments like that across the country, right?
I
Is
do.
that what you're thinking?
Yeah. So you asked very nuts and bolts questions. So let me get back to answering that. The bill, the Building Civic Bridges Act, would have four core pillars. It would administer a grant program to support bridge building programs, kind of like the one that I talked about. There are other bridge building programs in this nation that are based on service, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Other ones that are based on just having potlucks together and or having dinners together. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it.
Yeah.
And the point is just to bring people together across lines of difference. So a grant program to support those efforts. It would fund nonprofits to do that work, or public institutions, which could include schools, school boards, religious groups, among others. And that all is to address that toxicity in the polarization. It would also support the training of AmeriCorps members in civic bridge building skills. They're obviously, those AmeriCorps volunteers are embedded in all parts of our country, urban and rural, and are really doing a lot of really wonderful work.
And can I stop you there real quick?
Yeah.
I was surprised by that as well. Again, I like I told you before, I think I'm pretty civically minded and have a good understanding of most things government-wide and locally, that sort of thing. I have never heard of AmeriCorps and did not know about this arm of the government. You know, that like it's part of the government and it helps with unifying efforts. Like I didn't know that. You know, I thought that's what we're trying to build here in all of our efforts. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
AmeriCorps is amazing. AmeriCorps is brilliant. I encourage everyone to take a peek into it. It just celebrated its 30th anniversary. And they do all sorts of projects. And I will tell you, part of my ignorance is when I first started, I thought that AmeriCorps was primarily made up of newly graduated kids from college. That a lot of them would graduate from college and then go do a year or two of AmeriCorps before going on to higher education or launching into the workforce. It provides a lot of really good job skills training and is brilliant on a resume. And so I thought that was the entirety of the Corps, but I was wrong. Quite a bit of the AmeriCorps volunteers are actually seniors who have retired, who are giving back. And so one of the programs they do is they have it's like a foster grandparent program for kids who don't have, who need that appearance of a grandparent in their life.
Oh,
So
wow.
that foster grandparent program, they come in and they help the kids with the homework. They serve as a mentor.
Yeah.
Some of the work I've seen that they do as well is they've done some things where obviously the young generation is very into technology, and a lot of that older part of the core is not been raised in technology in the same way. And so they've actually done some cross-generational bridging. So not just political bridging, but cross-generational, about the younger kids were teaching the grandparents how technology could actually serve them in some ways, and then the foster grandparents were actually working with the kids on how technology needs to not be in this part of their their life, and instead they need to work on some interpersonal skills and stuff.
How to read a physical map maybe versus a Google map. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it really beautiful how as people who have done service know, as much as you think you're giving, you are getting so much more in return. And so AmeriCorps, there's tons of different programs. You can go to their website to really see all the ways that they function in our nation. But they're not just in schools, they're in all corners of our community and civic life, helping where there's room and need to be helped. And I got to tell you, they are not, when I say volunteer, they are volunteers.
Yeah.
They're not getting paid for this. It is service to our nation. And that sort of service to our nation, I think, is a really core piece of part of what's going on in this polarized world.
Yeah.
That, as we were talking before we began taping, a very big cornerstone of our support for the Building Civic Bridges Act has actually been organizations and members of Congress who have served in the military.
Yeah.
And there's, in that service to the military, it's not about party, it's about country. Because at the end of the day, you have a mission to defend our nation, and you have to carry out that mission with people that are in your group. And it doesn't matter what party or what belief they have on a policy, you have to carry it out.
Yeah.
And that sort of, that service where you put country so high is I think really, really key. And I'll add to it, especially because we're coming up on Memorial Day. And I think this is a really important point to make. On Memorial Day, we honor the people who have fallen protecting our nation, right?
Right.
And the challenge that I would issue to every single one of us in this nation is that service to our country does not have to mean going into the military. There are a lot of ways to serve our nation. AmeriCorps obviously is one, but you don't even have to do that. Go to a polling place, volunteer. They need, I think the last I heard, we were 1 million poll workers shy for the election in November. That's a way. There are tons of ways to serve through, just look in your community. What groups are there? How can you reach back out into your community and be of service to the people who are there? And that aspect of service, that's the challenge. Let's not, on Memorial Day, let's honor our fallen heroes, not by just saying thank you and lighting a candle or doing whatever we might do, but let's honor them by joining them in service. Let's honor them by saying, yes, you gave your life to our country, and I'll go give an hour this week. I mean, that's minimum.
Right.
That's
good. Well said. Well said. Yeah. So I derailed you there. I apologize on the AmeriCorps idea. I love that idea. And, when you hear so much about bureaucrats and the swamp, and it needs to be drained and all that, it's awesome to hear even a small arm of our federal government that is doing good work, and exists for a good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Listen, if I had control of the media cycle, I would pump up all the stories of the good work people are doing. They're getting buried.
Yeah.
This last week I was actually at a dinner in Washington for that was sponsored by Voices for National Service, and it was honoring AmeriCorps for its 30th anniversary, and it was also honoring several senators and representatives who have really done a lot to support the efforts of service in our nation. And I just thought, oh God, how great is this? Why aren't the stories that are up, that everyone up on that dais when they were taking their award told the most incredible stories? And I just thought, this is what should be in the media. Our nation needs to hear this. And the gentleman sitting next to me said, I agree, but you know what it's going to be? It's going to be that Marjorie Taylor Greene has made a motion to oust the speaker. That's exactly what's going to be tomorrow. And that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I just thought the chaos of that motion overshone the chance to highlight these incredible stories of people who are serving our nation, making life better, saving the day. And I mean, in America, we love a good superhero. We love our Marvel movies and we love Superman. And the
That's
stories
right.
the stories I heard that they were talking about that when Katrina happened, it was AmeriCorps who showed up. They were the first ones on the ground before FEMA got there, and they brought in the water, and they brought in the food and the baby
Wow.
diapers and all of that. And they were the heroes in that moment. They showed up first.
That's wild. Yeah.
And I just think, we do have superheroes in our nation. We do. And I want those people to be in the media.
And it's a double-edged sword. Like the unattention-seeking heroes, of course, don't get the least amount of attention because of that, but that's why sounds like awesome people that do that, that volunteer.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I think so.
So speaking, go ahead.
Maybe we should give them all of those volunteers capes so that it became very clear that they are superheroes in action, and then we'd pay attention.
Yeah, AC on the back.
Yeah,
some logo that can be designed there. Yeah, that's great. And so piggybacking on that idea of how that story got squashed because of the speaker news that was going to come out that next day. This is one of my core questions I had for you, which is, with so many active storylines nationally and globally, from the election to the Trump trials to Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, and U.S. funding those, does this bill have a real chance of being voted on in either the House or the Senate?
I will be quite honest, and I will tell you that if every single person that was tired of the polarization, that was tired on the drama, and tired of all of this craziness, took a second and contacted their legislator, their electeds.
Yeah.
If every single person did that, yes, it would get passed. So my question is, why are people complaining and not taking action? Maybe it's that they don't know what to do. And if that's the case, I'll tell you what to do. You can go to our website, www.resolutionaries.org, and we have a real easy, there's a giant take action button. You click that, you write a letter to your congressperson. It sends it straight off to your two senators and your rep, and see what happens. Because I'll tell you what, many, many times people have done that, and then they write us back, or they'll email us the voicemail that they've gotten back from their congressperson, and they are the person who's written the letter can't believe that the office has gotten back to them, because it's not a form letter. It's actually a real correspondence from the office that is saying, thank you for letting us know about your concerns. This is what we're doing on it. We will absolutely consider this bill, or this is our stance. These are our concerns. It's a real correspondence, and that will happen. So if you want to do something about what's crazy right now, go there. I challenge you, write a letter, and you see what happens.
Yeah.
They'll get
Yeah.
back to you.
I would not. I was hoping you would take us there because I would not let us go without talking about that
Mm-hmm.
automation on your website is really slick.
Oh, good.
Even from a technology standpoint, like you said, you insert your information, and for those that don't know who the representatives are, your site will just automatically tell them.
Yep.
And then you can insert your own language of what you want to say on top of
Mm-hmm.
the automated language, and bam,
Mm-hmm.
out go the letters to your representatives.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we work. I was talking with one of the congressional offices, and he said, between me and you, so I won't say the name of the office, but he said, between me and you, we get tons of form letters. So if you sign a petition, for instance, where you just sign your name or whatever, and it's just the same thing that goes through every time, or there's tons of people that do form letters all the time. He said, when we get those, thousands will come into the office, thousands of phone calls, because there's some organization that's got a lot of money behind it and they're pushing it through. And he
Robocalls,
said, he said, guess how many, I'm going to use the word votes, but guess how many votes or letters those thousands of calls and thousands of emails equal out to? One. Because it's just the same message over and over again, and it's clearly coming from the same person. He said, but when we get a real letter from a real constituent who has real concerns, and they are clearly articulated and thought out, which is what you can do on our website.
Right.
That letter, guess how many letters that one is worth? I mean, it's 100, he said. Because if we get one person who actually takes the time to do it these days, because no one does it, but if we actually do, we count it like it's 100 voices. Because we know if one person's taken the time to do it, there's a lot of other people who probably feel the same way.
They know it bubbled up to a point where if one person did it, there's some others probably close to that top level of bubbling up. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And that also makes sense. Not a lot of people do it now, or very few people do it now. So it's a rare event that now could spark a change. That's a wild idea if you really stop and think about it, because so many, I think, are convinced that our representatives do not really care about their constituents, or most of them, and are there to vote along party lines, right? And even this bill, it talks about this word that's commonly overused, right? Bipartisan support, bipartisan. You hear that just constantly kind of word vomited out. But in this sense, it really does mean bipartisan, and it means it crosses all ideologue lines for this kind of bill.
Yeah, they say bipartisan, but quite frankly, I would say it's cross-partisan, because we're not just Republicans and Democrats in this country. There's libertarians, there's independents. There's actually a lot of independents, let's be honest.
Right.
No labels, forward party, green party. I mean, there's actually people who have a lot of different views in our nation. And at the end of the day, a representative is beholden to its constituents. I'll tell you another story I had with another congressional office. And I was asking about this polarization and how Congress really, it looked like when people were going into the media that what those congressional representatives were doing they were posturing for power. It was a lot of sound bites that sounded fierce and, kind of militaristic, right? Actually, like campaigning in a military sense. And he said, look, when the American people want us to act a different way, we will all act a different way. And until then, we're going to act the way America wants us to act. Now, I was grateful that he was really clear in his response. But what I heard in that was actually an obfuscation of responsibility. And what I mean by that is he is a leader. He is a leader.
Yeah.
And his behavior, it cannot be excused. If he has bad behavior is bad behavior.
Right.
I tell my kids that all the time. A 6-year-old knows it. So I do believe that someone who is in office and far from being 6 years old, I mean, that gentleman was probably 66 or more. He should know that bad behavior is bad behavior and good's good. Kindness is kindness. Kids know that. And if you're going to work together, if you're going to do anything that's effective for this nation, you've got to figure out a way to work across the lines. There's another story I'll tell you. About 10 years ago in Minnesota, there was a piece of legislation. It was a piece of family law legislation that had to do with kids and child support. And it got thrown back and forth across the aisle for years, and they could never get it settled. I don't know exactly how it got into the court system, but it did. And a judge said, enough. You cannot play around with kids' lives like this. And he made the members of the Minnesota state legislature get in a room with a mediator for a set period of time to figure it out.
Huh.
And do you know what happened when that set period of time came out? It went back up for a vote, and it passed in one of the chambers unanimously, and in the other chamber, it had 3 dissenting votes. So years.
Jeez.
I mean, you want to talk about an efficacy of government. How much time and money was wasted just going back and forth in that power struggle? Judge says, get in a room, figuring it out. And real quick, they figured it out.
Yeah.
Now that saves time and that saves money. So I think that there's real power in this work. It's not just, I shared the story about the hug, which I think is really lovely, but it's not just about hugs and kumbaya. We're talking about our government. We're talking about the future that we are creating for our kids. And for me, I want whatever future we create for our kids to be one that is made out of wisdom and really thinking things through. I don't want it to just be some sort of like power struggle back and forth. That doesn't do anything. And at the same time, it actually actively hurts us. And do you have time for an example?
Absolutely.
Okay. So everybody remembers last summer with the debt ceiling crisis,
Right.
which led to Kevin McCarthy's ousting, right?
Right.
So here's the part that they covered this in the media a little bit, but they didn't really explain what it meant. So last summer, after all of that, Fitch, which is the organization that's in control of America's credit, our national debt, which is giant, Fitch downgraded our credit rating. Now, I'm going to guess nearly everyone listening to this podcast has a credit card. And everyone knows that when your credit goes down, your interest rate goes up.
Right.
Our debt is huge. So when Fitch downgraded our credit, specifically citing the erosion of governance and the repeated debt limit standoffs as part of their rationale for downgrading our credit, so directly linked to that posturing for power and all of that fighting that was going on in Congress, that downgrade meant our interest rate went up on our national debt. That is trillions of dollars. So much extra money that now we're going to have to pay for, our kids are going to have to pay for, because they were using polarization for media attention instead of getting the job done. So, and the thing is that this cultural moment isn't just like, that's one clear example of how
Right.
polarization is costing us money. Other examples, have mercy. I read these, I mean, it's a lot of macroeconomics. I am not a math person, but I hung in there to try to figure it out because it was real important to pull out the data that we needed to understand.
Yeah.
In years that polarization is high, there's an economist out of the Federal Reserve in Virginia. Her name's Marina Azamonte. She's done a lot of work on this. What she found is that the rise in partisan conflict between 2007 and 2009, which was the years she studied for her thing, resulted in a 27% decline in corporate investment. If the stock market went down by 27%, everyone's
Wow.
heads would be blown
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they would just be like, what's going on?
Right.
But corporate investment is hidden, so you don't see it. But that's a huge number. It also slows foreign investment in U.S. businesses. It does consumers change their behaviors when partisanship and polarization is high, because it goes back to that story that I told in Council Bluffs, Iowa,
Yeah.
that the ground doesn't feel safe. And when the ground below us doesn't feel safe, we change our spending behavior. So people stop buying as much. It also impacts behavior in the office because of, if politics, there's a higher instance now of conflict resolution in the workplace, which is costing American businesses roughly. I'm reading this right off the report so that I'm not bluffing on this number. It is real. $448.75 billion.
Ouch. Ouch.
That is the cost
Yeah.
of conflict resolution in the workplace because of what's going on.
Well, if you look at America like a large ship, cruising down the ocean, and you're thinking about investing in that ship, right? And but the more and more you got red and blue on either ends, sides of that ship, tipping that thing, and everything is running back and forth, and the more it does, the more it tips.
Oh yeah.
When all we need
Back
is people to
forth.
get back to the middle of the ship to slow it down.
Yeah.
The more it tips, the less you're going to invest in that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the more you're going to worry about that solid ground you talked about.
Yeah. So, that's from the economic standpoint, the impact is huge. And obviously we all feel it from a community standpoint. It's impacted my family. It's impacted my Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't think I'm alone. I don't think I'm alone at all.
No, yeah.
And then it also has really big impacts actually for national security, in really scary ways, actually. We do some, General Michael Hayden, who was the former director of the CIA and NSA, he actually published an op-ed with our organization that was published in All Sides in March this year. And he's written on this before, and in fact, in an article that was published with James Clapper, also 4-star general, I believe he's 4-star. They said, and I'll quote this so that I'm not getting this wrong. He said, the lengths to which our foreign adversaries will go to take advantage of any cracks in the foundation of our democracy is real. So there's that. Even Condoleezza Rice has talked about that this is a huge concern for her with national security. Talked about bipartisanship. Susan Rice has said the same thing. So
Yeah.
Susan Rice in Obama's administration and Condoleezza in Bush's. And then there was this report. This report scared the dickens out of me. I won't lie. It was the final report of the Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States. A lot of big words, but what it was, it's the Armed Services Committee in the Senate.
Okay.
And it was a report on we have some foes that have some nuclear weapons. What do we do? And in the report, and again, I want to quote, the commissioners stressed that any implementation of strategy to combat multiple major nuclear adversaries must be through a whole of government strategy that must begin with, quote, sustained bipartisan consensus, which is necessary to secure a strong future for the United States.
Yeah.
So this report is long. It's hundreds of pages. So they're saying, we're going to tell you everything you got to do for the nuts and bolts, but this doesn't mean anything if there is not sustained bipartisan consensus.
Wow. Boy, you came with receipts on all that stuff.
Lord have mercy. I just want
that's a
to,
rabbit
let's
hole.
just do it so that we can. Why do we have to go that far though?
I know.
Let me go back to my challenge. Let me go
Yeah.
back to my challenge. Everyone who, when I read that quote, got scared, go to our website, write a letter.
There you go.
Everyone who really, when I said those numbers on the economy and the debt, you just like the inside of you fired up, go to our website and write a letter. And engage in your community. There are so many initiatives out there that are so beautiful. There's Interfaith America actually has one called Faith in Elections. So if you have and if you're a member of a faith community, they are giving out grants for your faith community to help in this election cycle, to help prepare your community for dealing with everything that's going on.
That makes
Interfaith
sense.
has Interfaith has also a beautiful initiative called Team Up with Habitat for Humanity and Catholic Charities and the YMCA of the USA. It's a gorgeous initiative. There's all sorts of other things where people are like going back to potlucks, and they're calling on people to have their potlucks or a little voter preparation party where people can sit there and figure out what in the heck that ballot means from all over the place. Or just making sure the people in your community actually are able to get out there to vote. So if someone elderly in your neighborhood, can you give them a ride? All of those things, that goes back to service.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. It can just be a ride to the polling place. It can just be sharing a glass of lemonade with somebody down the street. That's a service in the community too.
Yeah, hopefully our audience can tell how this idea of service and civic understanding bleeds out of you through everything you've shared in this knowledge base you have is pretty wild. I've never heard anyone go through all these kind of details and all these little government, government funded, things like the AmeriCorps and all these things so much. Like, you should do a presentation on this, like on YouTube on your guys' channel quite often, just to teach people about these things. It's wild, and I'm curious. Like, one of my last questions here is, how often do you run into people that really still don't get it and really still don't understand why you need something like the Civic Bridges Act, and think that the solutions are always to just get the guy out of, get the other guy out of office or the other party out of office, sort of thing. Do you still run into that?
All the time.
And what do you do? What do you do with that?
Well, number one, so if we're talking specifically about the bill, I think quite often what happens is they don't understand what the bill is. Mm-hmm. So that's just, let's sit down and have a coffee and let me tell you what the bill actually does. Or they don't understand what bridge building is, and they just slough it off as something where, people are going to braid each other's hair and
kumbaya.
And kumbaya, which is not it at all.
Which they think is not possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Not at all. That's not what we're talking about. So number one, is it a matter of education? The other thing that we run into quite a bit is actually a lack of belief that they can do anything, that there's anything that can be done to change what's happening.
Yeah.
And, like we were talking before we ever started the recording, man, that makes me sad. If someone's really at a point that they're just like, there's nothing to be done, well, who's going to do it then? We are of the people, for the people, by the people. And if you aren't a person,
yeah,
I think you are a person. You're one of those people.
But within that, you're saying they do recognize that something should be done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's always my fear, is those that are locked in their echo chambers, in their bubbles, that maybe even don't see that there is a problem to be solved. But you're saying most of the times they at least recognize that.
Yeah, I think they do, because that feeling of being disaffected is a reaction to the problem.
Yeah.
So in that, inherently, there's a problem, but you've decided to just tune out from it.
Yeah.
Or you've decided that there's nothing that you can do about it. So I have a feeling actually it's something that feels really scary and big to those people. And so they don't, in not knowing how to do anything about it, it's easier to just ignore it, to put on the blinders. And to all of those people, I would say you do matter. You do matter a lot. And if you and your neighbor who feels the same way, and another neighbor that feels the same way, and all the people down the block who feel the same way, that there's nothing to be done. If you just took a chance and you did one tiny thing, all of those tiny things are going to add up to something real big. And my God, for the sake of our nation, for the sake of this gorgeous institution, please just do one tiny thing.
All right. That's fantastic. We should definitely end it there. And that one thing should start by going to resolutionaries.org and contact your members of Congress through the automated letter and talk to them about the Building Civic Bridges Act and get involved, like you said. Just a tiny little act like that, like on Memorial Day coming up. For context, we're recording on May 10th. Just little acts of service really add up. Yeah,
I really like that idea. Message. Honor the people who have served by serving too. What's that? God, they gave their life. Give 5 minutes of your time, an hour of your time.
Yeah,
I think that's doable.
And so many of us should, connect that if not for our kids, then for what? We need to leave them with a better life and a better future. And the way this is all headed it's not in a good direction.
Yeah, so let's just focus on what we can do.
Yeah.
Enough of the drama. What can we do? We can do this. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. We will, of course, put all of this. I don't know if we'll have enough room for all the things you mentioned on our episode description, but we will do our very best and make sure everybody hears about this. What are the next steps that you guys are working on, or what's, some events, or what can people do when they go to your website? They can donate with you guys as well, right?
They certainly could. All that donation is going to go towards helping the work, obviously, to extend the reach of this beautiful bill so that we can really do the good work of carrying out the power of what's possible. So you can certainly donate, write that letter. We also have a beautiful resource list of other ways that you can get involved. And it's organized in such a way, if you want to read something, you want to watch something, you want to take a quiz, if you're a teacher and you want to look at some curriculum that you could work with students, if you're a faith leader, there's all sorts of different ways that you can also get involved if you're looking at it. And of course, our website has our email address and our phone number, so feel free to get in touch. We're happy to help you find a way that you can really enter into the space of serving.
And people can find you on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook as well, I believe, right?
And LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so follow us. We always try to put stuff up that feels positive. So not just the scary stuff, but like, what can we do? Where can we go? What actions can we take so that we all feel empowered by this moment?
Resolutions. Yeah.
That's right. Resolutions.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Kara, it's been fantastic.
Toby, thank you.
We appreciate your time. Yeah. And,
I appreciate yours too.
We'll definitely be following you guys going forward. I've already followed you on Instagram, and I'll make sure our accounts follow you guys as well. So
fantastic.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll close it out there. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.